10 everyday things Americans do that are super strange to Irish people. And by Irish people, you could probably widen that to like British people as a whole. I mean, I think you can anyway. I'm sure there's going to be some Irish people that are like, no. I wonder what these things can be. I'm trying to think of like everyday things that Americans do that I find strange. Off the top of my head, nothing's coming up.
So today I wanted to look at 10 things that are like everyday. What? It's a good start, Diane. Okay, Diane. I want to look at 10 everyday things that are different in America than they are in Ireland. Probably going to refine that title before I post this. Before I get into the video, I saw a comment recently.
Mate, choosing the title of like how you're going to word it is so tricky, honestly, because you don't want it to be too long. But you want it to have the right amount of info.
Asking what the thing was on the couch behind me. It's a killer koala, and if you, specifically you, the person who asked what that thing was on the couch behind me, does not subscribe, you will have your face eaten off by my killer koala. His name is Chewy, and Chewy by name, Chewy by nature, so subscribe. Also, check out my social media. We have a good time there. I'm trying to post more stories on Instagram, so there's that. Okay, so the first everyday thing that I had to learn worked differently in America is a big one: money. The attitude to money in America and Ireland is super different. American people largely borrow money and rent things. A lot of times I'd be seeing these amazing cars, and then Lenny would turn around and be like, that person doesn't own that car, they're renting it, or renting to buy. Or you guys prefer to say leasing the car. In Ireland, you definitely buy your car outright. Recently I was talking about how if ever I got a car, I might consider renting to buy it. Everybody said that I was completely crazy because the car would end up costing more in the long run.
You're crazy!
It just isn't the norm here. It's not what people do. I've also noticed that
I will say that leasing or like PCP or hire purchase over the last few years has become really popular here. And it's such a strange one because on the one hand, you're paying a lot more for the car, and oftentimes you don't even own the car. If you're leasing it, you're going to give the car right back. But on the other hand, you get to drive a brand new car. You know, it's probably going to have less problems that you have to take it to the mechanic. So I'm not really sure where I stand. I've never leased a car before. Like I've always just bought the car outright, like saved for it. But I think for my next car, I'll probably do some kind of like rent to buy sort of scheme to get like a much newer car.
I guess because America is such a huge country, big amounts of money just seem to just not make people go, oh. On Dr. Phil, a lot of times you have people who've been catfished, and I know those are extreme examples, but they'll be like, oh, I sent $1 million over to this Nigerian prince. And everyone's like, wow, tough break, $1 million. And I'm like, $1 million? That's a lot of money. And obviously to the regular American, $1 million is a lot of money, but it just didn't have the
Oh my god!
element that I thought $1 million would have. But I get in the aspect of the size of the country, couple of million isn't a lot of money to you guys. The Taoiseach did his speech about the coronavirus the other day, and he was saying that they've set aside $3 billion provisionally to deal with this situation, and I'm like, holy moly, that's a lot of money. But I can only imagine how much it's going to cost America. Also,
like any Americans or people who are watching this that have leased a car, like, or you're doing some kind of like pay monthly scheme, why did you decide to do that? Like, because I'm weighing it up whether to just try and buy a car, but it probably won't be anywhere near a new car, like a brand new car, or doing like a lease or something like that. And I can't really figure out which direction to go. So why did you pick the leasing / financing the car?
So American people use checks, and Irish people like never use checks. I think the last time I was given a check in payment was about 10 years ago, and I was like, that's, unusual. So it was unusual like a decade ago, and like now nobody gives checks. I think people in Ireland don't trust checks, whereas checks are very common in the States. Also, you guys use PayPal there. Like you could go into a business and you'd be like, do you mind if I PayPal it to you? And people would be like, okay, no problem, which doesn't really happen here. Also, you guys don't use cash so much. You pretty much all use cards, which actually in the last week with this whole social distancing thing has become a lot more common here. All the tap your cards everywhere. It's just tap.
Yeah, I tap that.
So maybe cash is going to become redundant.
Do you still use checks in America? There's no way. There's no way, really. Like literally the last time I got a check, I think was about 2014, and it was like a rebate check from HMRC. They're like the English version of the IRS. I think I'd paid too much tax that year. I think that was the last time, yeah, like 10 years ago.
Everywhere. But in Ireland, up until very recently, we used cash like about as much as we use cards. So yeah, I find it pretty fascinating how just the attitude to how we use money is different. The next thing that's different in America is you don't see regular everyday people just going around on bicycles. Okay, I'm gonna say in small towns you would see it a lot more, but here in Ireland, even in the big cities, people go around on bicycles all the time. But not exclusively in the cities, also in the suburbs, also in the countryside, just everywhere in Ireland, wherever you go, you'll see people on bicycles. Whereas in America, it's definitely more depending on where exactly you are.
Yeah, I would imagine somewhere like New York, maybe, you probably see more people on bikes, maybe near like a university campus, like a college campus. But yeah, somewhere like, you know, where there's like big empty roads and stuff like that, where the distances are really big, you probably wouldn't cycle there. Like, where would you say are the most popular cities to cycle in America? I genuinely wouldn't be able to. LA, maybe?
And another reason for this, I think, is because you guys have way bigger roads, so I can imagine it's a lot scarier going on those bigger roads on bicycles. Also, I'm not sure what the legalities of going on all those roads is. I know you can't go on a motorway on a bicycle here. And your cars are absolutely huge, especially in Texas.
Check out my belt buckle. It says everything's bigger in Texas.
And like every single person's car was massive. I was just like, what? All the cars are huge. So if you're on a bicycle, it would be pretty intimidating,
Yeah,
I would
scary,
imagine.
yeah.
I'm not a bicycle person, but a lot of my friends are, so I don't know how they would really get around in America. I guess they'd all just have to ride cars. Much like people don't really walk places in America so much, I guess they also don't bike so much. I have friends like that actually who will get in their car just to go 5 minutes walk away, but generally people in Ireland are good for bikes and walking places. The next one, and we all know...
In America, do they have cycle lanes on the roads? Like, is there like a separate little, you know, strip of the road specifically for bicycles? Here, most roads have those. I would say like 80% of roads that aren't sort of like motorways or highways have those cycle lanes. Do they exist in America?
know that measurements are different in Ireland and in America, but the ones that really stuck with me was how differently you measure months and dates. We'd say the 20th of March, so the 20th of the 3rd, 2020, and you'd say March 20th. So then you'd say the 3rd, 2020.
This used to confuse me so much when I used to read like American forums. Like, for me, it just makes sense. You go day, month, year, like smallest to biggest. What do you think?
It's just a different way of doing it. I actually don't know that one's better than the other, but I do know that when I'm trying to organize my accounts, which is horrendous at the best of times, that it's really confusing when I'm going through my receipts, because now I've done so much traveling to America. I'm like, is that the month or the day? Also, I believe we use 24-hour clock here, whereas you guys don't, but your army does.
1,400 hours today.
But we don't say it. So if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll go, it's 2 o'clock. But we might write down 1400. But in America, people in the army would say, 1,400 hours or 1,400 hours or something like that. Correct me in the comments. I've never been in the American army. Surprising that. The next thing that I've noticed...
Man, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, oof. I get up pretty early, but 4... Like any military people watching this that had to get up at 4 a.m, 5 a.m, like, what was that like? Did you get used to it ever?
In America is that a lot of places people don't lock their door, and I'm not referring necessarily to cities here. I was talking to people at one of the meet and greets, and they were talking about how they come from a town where you don't even lock your door. And you'd think this one would be the other way around. You'd think in Ireland that people don't lock their door everywhere, but no, not so. In Ireland, everybody locks their door, even in the countryside. But in America, it seems to be like a source of pride if you live in a place where you don't need to lock the door and people just go in and out your door. Now, I get that doesn't apply to everybody, but it seems to definitely be a thing that happens, which just doesn't exist here. Also, I noticed that any of the Airbnbs that I've stayed in have not got alarms, whereas in Ireland, like, a lot of houses and apartments have alarms. And again, you'd think in New York City there'd definitely be an alarm, but there just isn't. And that's one of those everyday things that I was really surprised about.
I'm shocked.
I guess it indicates a level of trust in your community, but still nonetheless, like, bad things can happen anywhere. So I'd be inclined to always lock my door, but let me know below in the comments if you don't lock your door, and if so, why it's okay where you're at. The next...
It's an interesting one. I would love to be able to not have to lock my property. You know, just to have that level of trust in everybody, you know, around, and people in general. I think that would be so cool, you know. But at the same time, you know, having things of value in here, like the TV, the laptops and stuff like that, I think I'd probably be a little bit paranoid. Like, do you lock your door when you leave? Like, or do you live somewhere where crime is just so low that you don't have to?
The everyday thing that I noticed is, again, probably down to the size of America in comparison to Ireland, and it's that dress codes are not as strict over there. And even when there isn't a dress code in place, clothing wise, it's pretty much anything goes. Now, don't get me wrong, in Ireland we're not living in Downton Abbey. You don't have to wear your shirt and tails everywhere you go. Although I probably wouldn't wear a shirt and tails, would I? I could if I wanted to, because feminism. But yeah, this is something that me and producer Lenny noticed when we were over in America, especially with regard to bars and pubs and stuff. A lot of times in Ireland you will not be let in if you're wearing runners, or trainers as they call them in America. Whereas in America they're very much like, you're wearing your hoodie and your jeans, come on in. I get that there are public fancy places where dress code does apply, but in general it just seems way more whatever you feel like. Also, you'll find people wearing their best cocktail dress in a restaurant, and then like 2 tables down you'll see somebody in a hoodie and jeans. I think because Ireland is a bit smaller, we're all a bit more conscious, so you definitely do the what are you wearing thing before you go out somewhere. Or if I'm going to a restaurant, I might check out on Instagram what the kind of general attire is before I go there. And it's not a super strict thing, but it just seems to be a thing that just doesn't happen so much in America.
You can't wear stuff like that at church, man.
There are definitely places that are fancier than others and that would have a doorman and stuff, but I'm talking about the general everyday kind of places. There just doesn't seem to be a dress code. The next thing that...
Yeah, that's a big one. I remember going into the Walmart in Fresno, and there were just people in there who were just so, like, I didn't believe what I was seeing, like how they were dressed. It was like they literally rolled out of bed and just, you know, came to the Walmart. And I mean, you know what? If that's okay, that's fine. Just over here, like if you were to do that and go into a big store, you'd probably get like the odd glance, like what are you doing? Like I'm talking, you know, dirty pajamas. Like that's what I saw. Like I don't want to sound like judgy, and I'm not being judgy, but just here you probably would get like a lot of looks like from the people, and most of the people in the Walmart were dressed normally. It was just a few people that I was just like, man, wow, like the level of like I don't care is just
what I noticed in America is actually something that makes me really happy, and I wish we had a little bit more of it here. We've already talked about on this channel how people in the service industry tend to be really smiley and really nice, and there's been some debate over whether they do that just for tips or whether they're just inclined to be nicer. And one thing that makes me think that they just kind of are that way in a way is that they're kind of prepared to do things that are outside of the box. So if you have a special request or something, a waiter or a waitress will be like, yeah, no problem. Whereas in Ireland, they kind of can, not always, but they can look at you a bit like, that's a strange request, I'll go check if I'm allowed to do that. So for example, you see a lot more people asking for the sauce on the side, or can I get that without onions? And they're just like, yeah, sure, no problem. Whereas here they're like, I have to go check if that's okay.
Why are you making this so difficult?
Which isn't a problem, it's just how things are done here. Also, outside of restaurants, I've seen that be the case as well. On one of the trips, I had left something in one of the rental cars, and we didn't realize until I'd gone past security in the airport that it was in the car. And for whatever reason, the car rental service were just not being helpful in this case, but I ended up calling this parcel delivery place who went and checked in the car, got it out of the glove box, and ended up posting it over to a friend of mine who lives in New York. And it actually didn't take a lot of explaining for me to get them to do that. They were just like, okay. Whereas in Ireland, I find if you request like that, they're just like, what? That's no.
Yeah, here, no chance. You'd have to go to the depot and go and collect it yourself. Like, unless you paid through the nose, like you'd have to pay like yeah, I just don't see them ever doing that for you. I do think the tipping culture does allow that to happen, because, if you go above and beyond, I'm much more likely to give you a really, really, really good tip for sure.
But it's not a thing we do. We deliver parcels. That's what we do. And usually you actually will be able to talk an Irish person around, but special requests are like very
Rare.
special. Whereas I guess maybe because there's a higher turnover of customers, they'd be used to unusual requests in America. I don't know if I'm explaining that one too well. Let me know if I have. The next thing is one I've mentioned before, but I don't know if I put enough emphasis on it. In America, pets are very much accepted in just general society. In Ireland, people love their pets, they're mad about their pets, but it's very much you leave your pet in your house when you go out. I am considered very unusual with my pet. Unusual / a bit of a freak.
You said it.
Because I bring my dog everywhere in his bag, and usually I have to do it undercover because dogs are not allowed to go anywhere pretty much in Ireland. In America, you can bring them to malls, and there's even like special areas for them to go.
Yeah, I've even seen like videos of like dog cafes and cat cafes where you can bring your dog and just let your dog roam the cafe and hang out with the other dogs. Definitely seems to be a lot more pet friendly in America, or certain American places.
You can bring them on airplanes. You guys have a thing called an emotional support animal, and a lot of people seem to have their animal classified that way. And I think if I was in America, I definitely would have my dog classified that way because that's what he is. Sometimes I get really anxious if he's not around, but in Ireland, it's just not really so much a thing, an emotional support animal. Now, the idea of an emotional support animal does exist here, but it's very much a, sure, that's your emotional support animal, but it doesn't give you any rights to bring him anywhere. But you can call him an emotional support animal if you want. You can't bring an emotional support animal on an airplane. A lot of people have said to me, why don't you bring Chewie on an airplane? Because you're not allowed. You have to go through a lot of hoops to bring a dog in a cabin on an airplane, and it's pretty much 99.999% not going to happen.
So in America, you can literally book a flight and take your dog with you on the plane. Like literally that's it. Is it as simple as like you ticking a box on the, when you're putting your payment details in that I would like to take my pet with me? Is it really that simple? Wow. If that's the case, I think it's a lot, like she says, it's a lot harder to do it over here. Like way harder.
I've recently been looking into whether he could go on an American Airlines flight as an emotional support animal, but that's kind of been put on hold because nobody's going anywhere right now.
You can't leave.
If you're watching this in the future, it's 2020 and we're all in coronavirus lockdown. Hope you came through that the other side okay in the future.
God.
But yeah, in Ireland, people love
Such a weird time, wasn't it? It was just the weirdest time. Like, I remember people were like, arguing over toilet roll here. You would go to like the store and people would be like, it's mine. No, it's mine. No, it's mine. It was insane.
their pets, but they're very much like put in a category of pets. They just stay home or they go for walks, but they're not like part of your everyday going out and about life. The next thing that's strange in everyday life in America is that school children don't wear school uniforms unless they're in like a fancy school. I might be wrong on that, maybe it's not exclusively fancy schools, but that's what I've been led to believe. So in Ireland, the standard is that you will wear a school uniform going through all the years of school.
Same as here. Usually in secondary school, it's like a blazer, like a suit jacket. It's basically like a full suit. And your school will have its own tie and its crest that it would have on the sort of breastplate there. And in primary school, which is like from age 4 to 10, there would be a uniform as well. It would be like a jumper, like a sweater, the school crest on the chest, smart shoes.
And actually, this is one I even appreciated when I was a kid because I didn't have to think about what I was going to wear to school every day. I had like 2 jumpers and 2 skirts and 2 shirts. Actually, you probably had more shirts.
I've never seen so many shirts.
But there wasn't that choice there. Now, you did manage to customize them because, especially teenagers, they're like, I want to express myself. But if you went too far, like a teacher would pull you aside and say, like, you can't wear that. That's not part of the uniform. It also kind of took away a little element of the competitiveness, I think. And that.
Yes, I agree because, I can imagine in a school where there's no uniforms, there'll be some kids who come in with the most expensive clothes, designer shoes, and it might make the other kids jealous,
That was good, especially when you're a teenager and people are so inclined and susceptible to being bullied. It just took away something that you could be bullied about. When I was in kindergarten, which is like junior, senior infants, age 5 and 6, we did wear our normal clothes, but we wore a smock over it. So again, it was a great leveler, and also little kids get to not ruin their clothes and their parents can just bundle their smock in the washing machine. In 5th and 6th year, which are the final 2 years in Irish school, my school let you wear whatever you wanted because they actually felt like they were trying to prepare you for college and the real world, like you'd be able to decide for yourself. And the ironic thing about that was we all ended up wearing pretty much the same thing anyway. There were girls in my all-girls school who used to wear heels and mini skirts to school, and honestly we all just looked at them like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I don't even think in my school you could get away with that. Like, genuinely, I think you would get in trouble for that. I've never seen... Yeah, no, they all wore sort of flat, you know, those like flat black ballet sort of shoes.
I mean, that sounds bad, but whatever.
For the most part, pretty much everybody wore their tracksuit bottoms and a hoodie and a t-shirt. The next everyday thing that is different in America is how you do floors. Like, they're totally different.
Do you think Americans watching this, that it would be better if they wore uniforms in American schools? Or do you think you'd rather keep it as it is now, where people can just wear whatever they like? I think I favour uniforms, to be honest with you.
And it's confusing from a brain head. So in America, if somebody says that my room is on the 3rd floor, it means it's 2 floors up from the reception, because the ground floor is just 1, and then the next floor is 2, and then the 3rd floor is 3. Whereas in Ireland, the ground floor is just called the ground floor, and then 1 floor up is floor 1, and then the next floor is floor 2, and the next floor is floor 3. So you're actually 4 floors up, but it's the 3rd floor, if that makes sense. I hope it does. Again, it's just a different way of doing things. No one is right or wrong. It's just something that took a little getting used to, especially in elevators. One time I got stuck in an elevator because I was so confused about where exactly I was going. I just went up and down for like a good 10 minutes. So that's probably a me thing and not generally to do with floors. And the number one everyday thing that I noticed is a huge difference over there is how you guys handle temperature and air. And again, this is one I've mentioned before, but I don't know that I've put enough emphasis on it.
This is a big one. It does seem like air conditioning is just a lot more popular in America. And I really, really wish and think, to be honest, it's going to become popular over here. I know it's not the most eco-friendly thing, but it's starting to get really warm here. Like, the summers here are really getting hot. And because of the way our buildings are built, like thick brick walls, the heat just stays inside and you're just sweating. Last summer I was sweating like an animal.
In Ireland, people have central heating. We will have radiators and stuff like that around your house, but we don't have anything for cooling. Well, we have windows. And the temperatures that Ireland kind of goes to means they're usually sufficient, although we will still complain of being roasting in the summer and freezing in the winter. But that's just how we describe temperature.
Stop being dramatic.
I have family over in Spain, and the way that they handle temperature is that they have air conditioning, but their heating system of the house is not so good at all. So kind of like an opposite there. Whereas in America, they all just kind of go, we can control temperature and air because we are Americans, which
It's a pretty good accent, to be fair.
is fair enough. In America, you guys have really good air conditioning systems and really good heating systems equally. And I guess that's to do with the massive fluctuation in temperature that you have there. Also, humidity is a big thing. I can kind of see how opening a window just wouldn't work in the massive heat of some states. You guys' attitude to...
Yeah, like, I can imagine, based on what I've heard, Texas in the summertime, opening the window wouldn't get you anywhere in terms of cooling down the place. Like, any Texans watching this, if you didn't have air conditioning in the summer, would you be able to cope? Like also if you live in like Arizona, California, another state that gets really hot summers, could you live without air conditioning, do you think?
Temperature and air is basically to shut the room off and then control it with devices. One of my patrons sent me this Dyson heater cooler thing, and honest to God, it changed my life. And when my friends come over, they're just like, what the hell is that? It's not that it doesn't exist here. People do have air conditioning units, just it's not common. I did get a little
Not common at all.
slagging over it. They were just like, open a window, Diane. But you know what? I actually love my Dyson thing. It's great.
Shut up!
What I did find strange in America is that when I'm walking around outside and then I go into a store, the temperature in the store is completely different than what it is when I'm walking around outside. And I don't know how American people handle that. Maybe you guys bring your jackets everywhere, but I would be walking around outside, fine, grand, lovely temperature, and then I'd go into a supermarket and I'd be freezing, like absolutely freezing.
Always with the drama.
And nobody else.
Me, I love it like cold though. I'm much, would you say that you're a hot person or a cold person? Like I get really hot quickly. So me, I can deal with like a cold temperature much easier than being in a hot one, because it's easier to get warm than it is to cool down, don't you think?
Looked freezing, and they were all in t-shirts as well, so maybe you guys are just super used to it. But let me know below in comments what you think of the whole air thing. And that's it for today's video. I just want to thank the members of Squad.
Great video, great video. A lot of the stuff she spoke about I actually agree with. It just at the start of the video they slipped my mind. The temperature one, I think you're going to start seeing British homes come with air conditioning units. I think it's going to happen. You know, I need to find one that you can move around. Like if I'm in the living room, I can put it there. If I'm cooking or whatever, I can put it in the kitchen. This summer, I have to have an air conditioner because last summer was brutal. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.